You might have never heard a story like this before. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, the future Queen of England, walked into a state dinner and overrode Camilla's direct orders. And for the first time in years, someone inside that palace finally had the courage to say, enough. Britain had been watching these two women circle each other for years. On one side, Camilla, the woman who broke up a marriage the whole country loved, a woman who didn't earn her position through grace or service or sacrifice, but through manipulation and waiting for Diana to disappear so she could step into her place. On the other side, Catherine, everything Camilla was not. Dignified, devoted, and a future queen the public had actually chosen to love. Camilla herself assumed she had already won, and why wouldn't she? This is a woman who destroyed a marriage, buried her reputation, and still ended up with the crown. By the time Catherine arrived on the scene, Camilla had quietly made herself the center of everything, and nobody inside that palace had ever dared to push back. Then came the state dinner last Thursday. One table, one seating plan, one very deliberate message from Camilla about exactly who was in charge, just like she always does, just like she has always done. Catherine walked in and changed it, all of it. Sources close to the palace confirmed it within hours. By Friday morning, the story was already spreading through every royal correspondent in Westminster. What happened that night didn't just embarrass Camilla, it announced something. Before we go deeper into exactly how Catherine pulled this off, make sure you subscribe, because I promise you, this is only the beginning. Let's get back to it. To understand why that moment hit so hard, you need to understand what Camilla had been building inside that palace for months before that state dinner ever appeared on the royal calendar. Camilla's household had been quietly expanding its reach into territory that was never hers to touch. State ceremonial decisions, seating arrangements, guest positioning, the formal order of addresses at official royal occasions, these had always belonged to the Lord Chamberlain's office, the department that exists specifically to organize major royal ceremonies under the sovereign's authority, not Camilla's office. Her household started making those calls anyway. Sources inside the palace finally confirm every week instructions would go out from Camilla's office to event coordinators. Small adjustments at first, a guest moved here, a name card shifted there. The kind of changes that, individually, looked like administrative tidying, nothing that would raise an immediate alarm. But taken together over months, they told a very different story, a pattern of control that carried no formal authorization behind it, and everybody involved knew it. They just didn't know what to do about it. Senior staff followed the instructions without question, because questioning Camilla inside that palace carried consequences, and everyone working those corridors understood that perfectly well. This wasn't a secret. It was an open arrangement that nobody wanted to be the first to challenge, so they didn't. Week after week, the instructions kept coming. Week after week, people kept following them. 3 separate coordinators raised concerns internally. I want you to remember that number, 3. 3 different professionals who understood royal protocol well enough to recognize that what Camilla's office was doing had no business happening. They raised their concerns through proper channels. They documented their objections. They did everything right. Quietly and without any public acknowledgement whatsoever, all 3 were reassigned within the same month. What replaced them were people who asked fewer questions. People who understood their role was to execute instructions, not interrogate them. And just like that, Camilla's household had constructed something inside those walls that felt completely routine, completely untouchable. New staff assumed this was simply how things worked. Veteran staff had already learned to stay silent. The whole operation ran smoothly, because anyone who might have disrupted it had already been removed. Remarkable, honestly. Not in an admirable way, in the way that makes you realize exactly how calculated this woman is, because this didn't happen by accident. Camilla was building a structure of control so embedded in daily palace operations that challenging it would eventually feel impossible. Eventually. Nobody had stopped her yet. but Catherine had been watching every single move. What Camilla didn't know, what she never once accounted for, was that one of those reassigned coordinators didn't stay quiet. A woman who had coordinated 3 state visits, 2 Commonwealth receptions, and 1 royal funeral without a single formal complaint filed against her work. She knew that palace better than most people who had spent their entire careers there, and after months of watching Camilla's office operate without any formal authorization, after being reassigned without explanation or cause, she made a decision that took genuine courage. 2 weeks before the state dinner, she requested a private meeting with Catherine's office, not through any channel that Camilla's household might monitor, personally and quietly, the kind of meeting that leaves no paper trail unless someone deliberately creates one. Catherine agreed to the meeting within 24 hours. No aides present, just Catherine, composed, attentive, asking exactly the right questions while she laid out everything she had witnessed. The unauthorized instructions, the reassigned staff, the systematic manipulation of seating arrangements across multiple events. The way Camilla's office had spent months making Catherine's ceremonial position look smaller than it actually was. Not accidentally, not carelessly, but deliberately and consistently. Directly after that meeting, Catherine made one phone call, and this is the moment I genuinely cannot stop thinking about. She called the Lord Chamberlain's office herself, with documentation already prepared. Because here is what most people missed completely. Catherine didn't walk into that meeting unprepared. She arrived with weeks of her own observations already recorded. Her own staff had been quietly tracking the pattern from a different angle. The Lord Chamberlain's office took the call, reviewed the documentation Catherine provided, and within 48 hours, they had launched a formal internal review of every state ceremonial event held in the previous 4 months. I have said it before and I will say it again. You do not make a move like this impulsively. You make it when you have already won before anyone realizes the game has even started. Catherine didn't react to Camilla. She prepared for her. And when the moment arrived, she was ready in a way that Camilla, for all her 50 years of palace experience, simply never saw coming. The Lord Chamberlain's office completed their review in 72 hours. What they found didn't just support Catherine's concerns, it blew the entire thing wide open. Because this wasn't just about one state dinner, this was a pattern, and now it was documented. 72 hours. That is how long it took the Lord Chamberlain's office to review 4 months of state ceremonial records and confirm what Catherine had brought them. 4 months of a parallel operation running quietly inside the palace, issuing directives, adjusting arrangements, repositioning people, with no formal sovereign authority behind a single one of them. Buried inside the paperwork were instructions that had gone out under Camilla's household seal to external coordinators, instructions about guest seating that directly contradicted the formal order of precedence. The order of precedence, for those unfamiliar, is the official ranking system that determines exactly where every member of the royal family sits, stands, and appears at formal occasions. It is not a suggestion. It is constitutional protocol, centuries old, formally maintained, and absolutely not something any individual household can quietly rewrite to suit their own agenda. In 2 separate events over the previous 4 months, Catherine had been seated in a position that did not reflect her actual rank. 2 times, at 2 different official royal occasions. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, second in line to become queen, had been repositioned downward, quietly, systematically, in a way designed to be invisible unless someone was specifically looking for it. And I want to be completely honest with you right now. When I first read the details of what that review uncovered, I had to stop. Because this was not careless administrative error. This was not a miscommunication between departments. Documented, deliberate, authorized directly by Camilla's office on both occasions. Worse still, the review found correspondence sent to 3 foreign diplomatic teams ahead of previous events, outlining seating arrangements that placed Camilla's position in closer ceremonial proximity to visiting heads of state than her actual protocol ranking permitted. In diplomatic settings, proximity to a head of state is not just symbolic. It carries real political weight, real implications about who holds authority, real messages sent to foreign governments about the internal hierarchy of the British monarchy, messages that Camilla's office had been sending without Charles's knowledge or approval. By the time the review concluded on Wednesday evening, the Lord Chamberlain's office had compiled a formal findings document running to 11 pages detailing unauthorized instructions, compromised arrangements, and deliberate protocol violations spanning 4 months of official royal events. The correction order went out Thursday morning. Camilla's office received it at 11 a.m., a formal binding directive reversing every unauthorized arrangement for that evening's state dinner and restoring the correct order of precedence across all positions at the table. Her household had 4 hours to respond before the evening began. And here is where it gets very interesting, because Camilla didn't accept it quietly. Within 20 minutes of receiving that correction order, Camilla's office was on the phone to the Lord Chamberlain's department. The argument they made was immediate and aggressive. The changes would create confusion, disrupt the carefully planned flow of the evening, embarrass foreign dignitaries who had already been briefed on the previous arrangements. They framed it as a logistical problem, a practical concern, the kind of reasonable-sounding objection designed to make the correction feel like the problem rather than the solution. It was, if nothing else, a very polished attempt. Very Camilla. She pushed hard for 40 minutes. Lord Chamberlain's department didn't move. When that didn't work, when it became clear that the formal findings document made their position completely unassailable, Camilla went directly to Charles. This was her final card, the one she had always been able to play. In the past, Charles had absorbed these situations quietly, smoothed things over, chosen peace over confrontation because the alternative was too complicated and too public. Camilla had relied on that pattern for years. She expected it now. Charles listened to everything she said. He told her the Lord Chamberlain's office was correct, that the order of precedence existed for a reason that predated both of them, that he would not, could not, override formal constitutional protocol for personal preference. And I'll be honest with you, I genuinely believe this was the moment that hurt Camilla more than anything that happened at the dinner itself. Personally, I think that tells you everything about where things really stand between Charles and Camilla right now. Because this was not a small ask. Camilla was asking Charles to intervene in a formal Lord Chamberlain's review, to publicly override a findings document on her behalf. That is an enormous request, and Charles said no. According to sources close to the household, Camilla ended that conversation abruptly. No formal goodbye, no agreement to discuss further. The call simply stopped. Staff at her residence described the 4 hours between that phone call and the dinner as the most tense they had experienced in recent memory. Instructions that would normally flow easily through her household that afternoon came slowly, if at all. 2 scheduled briefings were canceled without explanation. Her personal aide was seen leaving her private sitting room twice within an hour, both times without speaking to anyone waiting outside. 6 floors away, in a completely different wing of the palace, Catherine was getting ready for dinner. By 6 p.m. Thursday evening, Camilla had 2 choices: stay home and make the absence impossible to explain, or walk into that room knowing that everything she had spent months carefully constructing had already been dismantled before the first guest arrived. She chose to walk in, and what happened next is something nobody in that room will forget. Arriving at a state dinner as queen consort carries a specific weight. There is a sequence to it: the entrance, the acknowledgement from staff, the moment the room subtly reorganizes itself around your presence. Camilla had walked into dozens of these evenings. She knew exactly how they felt. She knew where she would stand, where she would sit, who would greet her first, and in what order. That knowledge, that absolute certainty about her own position in the room, was part of what made her formidable. Walking in already knowing how the evening would unfold gave her a composure that most people in that palace simply couldn't match. The composure lasted until she saw the table. Catherine was already seated, not waiting near the entrance, not standing in conversation near the side of the room. Already seated, exactly where formal protocol placed her, in the position that correctly reflected her rank as Princess of Wales. Warm, relaxed, deep in conversation with a senior foreign dignitary, laughing at something he had said with the ease of someone who had absolutely nothing to prove, and nowhere else she would rather be. Photographers positioned around the perimeter of the room captured the moment Camilla entered. In the photographs now being studied by every royal correspondent in the country, her face is controlled because she is far too experienced to let a room full of diplomats see her react. But her hands tell a completely different story. Clasped together in front of her, slightly tighter than usual, her shoulders carrying a tension that her expression was working hard to contradict. Camilla stood at the edge of the table for 3 seconds. Royal correspondents who were present noted it specifically, before a senior aide appeared at her elbow and guided her gently toward her seat. 3 positions from where she had expected to be. 3 positions that, in the formal language of royal ceremonial occasions, represented an enormous and very public recalibration of her standing in that room. An aide leaned close and whispered something. Camilla nodded once slowly and sat down. I have watched a considerable amount of royal footage over the years. I have studied the way these people are trained to manage their expressions, their posture, their reactions in public settings. And I can tell you, what every camera in that room captured on Camilla's face during those first 10 minutes was not composure. That was someone realizing, in real time, in front of an audience she could not dismiss or reassign, that she had lost. Both photographs currently circulating, the ones every royal correspondent is now analyzing frame by frame, show Catherine and Camilla in the same shot. In both images, Catherine is positioned higher at the table. In both images, she is engaged, relaxed, entirely at ease. In both images, Camilla is present but peripheral, visible but diminished. By the time the first course was served, the evening had already delivered its verdict. Midnight came. The photographs were already circulating across every major news platform. By Friday morning, royal correspondents across Westminster were writing the same story from different angles, all of them arriving at the same conclusion. The changing of the guard was no longer coming, because what Catherine did that night was bigger than one dinner, bigger than one seating plan, bigger than one very uncomfortable evening for a woman who had spent 50 years making sure evenings like that never happened to her. Friday morning arrived and the palace said nothing. No statement from Camilla's office. Her communications team offered no carefully worded response. Nobody leaked context or damage control to sympathetic journalists. Just silence, the kind of silence that inside royal circles speaks more clearly than any official statement ever could. When Camilla has something to say, she finds a way to say it. The silence wasn't restraint. It was retreat. Camilla's household, the one that had spent months issuing unauthorized instructions across 4 state events, reassigning 3 senior staff members for asking reasonable questions, systematically repositioning Catherine downward at 2 separate official occasions, issued nothing. Not a single word in response. Not one. Royal correspondents across Westminster spent Friday morning writing versions of the same story. The language varied, but the conclusions didn't. Every serious analyst covering the British monarchy arrived independently at the same place. Something had shifted inside that palace in a way that formal announcements rarely capture, and careful press management cannot reverse. Photographs did what words couldn't. They showed it. William and Catherine appeared together the following morning at a public engagement in London. Relaxed, smiling, completely unbothered. The way people look when they have done something they are entirely at peace with. No statement, no triumphant gesture. Just 2 people going about their duties with the quiet confidence of a household that knows exactly where it stands. Nothing about their demeanor suggested a battle had just been fought. Precisely the point, I think. Diana once said the palace had ways of making people disappear. From experience, from the inside, as someone who understood exactly how the institution absorbed, managed, and eventually erased the things it found inconvenient. History proved her right. History also made her one of those things. For a long time, I genuinely wondered whether anyone inside those walls would ever learn to use that same system in the other direction. What Catherine just proved is that it works both ways. Camilla spent 50 years learning how that palace worked, which rules bent, which relationships mattered, which silences protected her and which exposed everyone else. Something that felt permanent because she had made herself so embedded in daily palace operations that removing her felt structurally impossible, had been quietly, methodically dismantled. Studying that structure was exactly what Catherine had been doing, not to admire it, to understand it, to learn every pressure point, every protocol, every formal mechanism that existed specifically to prevent what Camilla had been doing, then use those mechanisms with a precision that left no room for argument, appeal, or reversal. 50 years of palace experience versus 10. And on a Thursday evening, over a state dinner Camilla thought she controlled, the student didn't just catch up, she won.